The fact is that you don't have free trade. We think of it as free trade, but you right now don't have free trade. And I think a lot of people are tired of watching other countries ripping off the United States.
Our country, from an economic standpoint, a financial standpoint, and a trade standpoint, has been absolutely ripped off by almost every country in the world. Canada, Mexico, and then you just go right down the line.
We have a $500 billion deficit, trade deficit with China, because we can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing.
We let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible.
If you look at China, where we lose $100 billion a year with China.
That was President Trump over the last half century singing the same exact song he's singing today about foreign countries ripping off the United States when it comes to trade. Clips like that have gone viral repeatedly over the years to illustrate not just Trump's commitment to the subject over time, but also his authenticity and sincerity about the subject when he talks about it now. Ever since he was a strapping young man building his real estate empire from the ashes of a New York City left for dead after its bankruptcy, President Trump built his perspective on business and trade from the ground floor all the way up to his golden penthouse today. Make America great again. That's the world-famous refrain that won him the presidency 3 times. He may have developed that perspective in his efforts to make New York great again after its fiscal woes. Everyone knows Trump's business experiences helped shape Trump's perspective on politics and trade, but few know or understand that the very city he grew up in and helped build contributed to his perspective as well. MAGA is an ideology developed and perfected in New York City. Without New York City, there is no MAGA. It's a 5-borough ideology that was scaled up to national presidential success and perhaps even global relevance too. Bright lights, big city glitz, skyscrapers, and Wall Street wealth is the brand that carries through the country when people think about the Big Apple. But few actually understand what makes New York City work on the street level. All the fancy hedge funds and tailored suits running around Manhattan might give the impression that it's the corporate globalist headquarters of America and always has been. But nothing could be further from the truth. New York City actually has a very, very strong vein of protectionism that drives how local politicians and policies deal with their small businesses. To illustrate this, let's talk about Walmart. Walmart has tried for a long time to establish a footprint in New York City limits. Back in 2011, there was a massive push from the retail giant to try and convince city slickers New York was ready for its own location. How did that turn out? New Yorkers told Walmart to drop dead, and for good reasons too. New York City at the time had an economy where small businesses accounted for over 99% of all the firms in the city and responsible for over 50% of the employment. When we need everyday essentials or a bacon, egg, and cheese for breakfast, we go to the bodega down the block, not 7-Eleven or a Whole Foods or some retail giant like Walmart. President Trump also knows that. That's why he visited a bodega in Harlem during his most recent presidential campaign. If Walmart had succeeded in establishing a location in the 5 boroughs, it would have devastated our small business-backed local economy and ruined the urban character and the communities that make that engine work every day. We spend money with our neighbors, our local businesses, with people we can attach a name and face to the product or service being provided. We like that kind of personal touch when we do business in New York. We enjoy finishing our transactions with a smile and a handshake. The politicians standing against this big business infiltration at the time were all Democrats, and they triumphed over Walmart coming in, and I'm glad they did. I thank them for that. But Walmart got its own sweet revenge about a decade later. The COVID pandemic. The lockdowns led to about 33% of all small businesses in New York to shut down forever. Mom and pop shops, beloved by the locals, in business for 50 to 100 years, gone and never coming back. And who were the businesses that were winners during the COVID pandemic? Amazon and Walmart. They survived and thrived. Meanwhile, so many of the small businesses New York City went out of its way to protect were now gone forever. President Trump, understanding the business culture that drives New York City, took it national. At the end of World War II, Americans celebrated the global liberation from Nazism and tyranny, and in Times Square, this famous photo went viral during its time. Almost a century later, a president from New York City declared Liberation Day at the White House. Trump announcing sweeping reciprocal tariffs on all nations who threatened American businesses with their cheap and low-quality goods. President Trump put an end to the world looking at America and saying, "Free market for me, but not for thee." Another reason Walmart never made it in New York City was because it had a brand that could be reduced to understanding it as a sweatshop. Now nations like China and India have a similar disregard for labor standards, but America gives them privileged access to the American market? Liberals in New York City should be fuming, just like they were when Walmart tried to pull the same stunt in their city. But they aren't. Why? American labor standards are certainly worth defending to some degree, but American environmental standards should also be upheld when it comes to trade. New York City is famous for its ample, sweet tap water that gives our pizza its unique taste. If we found out that someone was polluting that for business purposes, you wouldn't like it when a New Yorker gets angry. But on the global stage, China and India pollute the world's air and water at an alarmingly overwhelming rate. Some people actually think the tariffs don't go far enough. Joining me now is one of those people. He's the 76th president of the New York Young Republican Club, a columnist for townhall.com, and my partner in crime when it comes to anything New York MAGA politics, Gavin Wax. Gavin, thank you so much for joining.
It's great to be here, Vish, and thank you for having me.
Gavin, I want to play this clip first from your speech at the NYYRC Gala in 2023 and get your reaction.
President Trump broke the blue wall. He won states that Republicans have only dreamed of winning, and he completely ushered in a new populist political realignment. And in many ways, it started from this very spot, in this very stage, and in this very city. A city that I know President Trump loves dearly, a city that he grew up in, a city he walked the streets in, a city that he left an indelible mark on, from the beautiful and ever iconic Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue to Central Park's Wallman Ice Skating Rink, or even down the block to 40 Wall Street. Almost every corner of this city, from Manhattan to Queens, has played a massive part in the life of President Donald J. Trump. So to welcome him back to his hometown, back to where it all began, is truly symbolic. Because make no mistake about it, the Trump movement is truly a New York movement. And you will never understand President Trump or his movement unless you understand New York.
You will never understand President Trump or his movement unless you understand New York. Gavin, what'd you mean by that?
Listen, Vish, President Trump is a man of the outer boroughs. He's quintessentially Queens. And look, the outer boroughs are sort of a microcosm of forgotten America. You look at New York City, it's always been about Manhattan. It's always been about the glitz and glam of Manhattan, the elite in Manhattan. But at the end of the day, President Trump's from the outer boroughs, the forgotten outer boroughs, the working class outer boroughs, the more industrial outer boroughs, the outer boroughs that really kept the city running and have, in many ways, kept large parts of this country running. And I think his movement, his populist movement that appeals to working class Americans, blue collar Americans, everyday Americans, is an outer borough movement. It's the same movement that represents the forgotten Rust Belt. It represents the forgotten regions of Appalachia and the South. It's the movement that represents the people that are struggling on the border, dealing with the open border, the cartels, the drugs, and you name it. It is not the movement of the coastal elites. It's not the movement that cares about the stock market market, frankly, which we're going to talk about more very shortly. And this is a movement that goes back to the beginnings of the sort of populist revolution in this country, going back, to the hard hat riots in New York City in the 1970s, protesting for Nixon. Those are the original blue collar conservative voters. They used to be Democrats. They used to vote Democrat. They eventually have now shifted to the Republican Party. And that's really the genesis in many ways of the MAGA movement and the MAGA agenda. So it's quintessentially New York, just like its leader and its main ideological champion, President Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, outer borough boys, just like you and I. Well, coming to Liberation Day now, Gavin, what are the most egregious examples of tariffs that have been in place on U.S. goods this whole time?
I mean, look at some of the tariffs that Trudeau's Canada, or formerly Trudeau's Canada, was placing on our agricultural products, such as dairy. I mean, you're talking about tariffs that are north of 100%. Some cases, they go as high as into the thousands. These aren't even tariffs at this point. These are straight up trade restrictions, trade barriers, because for all intents and purposes, you cannot export those goods into certain countries like Canada. So we've seen a whole litany of issues like this. Many American products such as American beef and other American agricultural products and farm goods and foodstuffs are completely banned in Europe. So we talk about tariffs, but we don't even talk about sometimes the trade restrictions that go beyond tariffs, that are more radical than tariffs. So there has never been a level playing field. We haven't had any free trade as far as I'm concerned. It's been managed trade, and it's been managed poorly by the elites in this country. And I think President Trump rightly recognizes that. He's recognized that for a very long time. He's been quite consistent in his views as it relates to trade and manufacturing and the deficits that we've been running in terms of our trade imbalances. And he wants to reshore American jobs, reshore American industry, and make us self-sufficient and independent once more, and not have us be strictly a country of consumers driven by debt, but a countries of producers driven by savings. And I think that's the America that was once incredibly great. That was the America that became a superpower. That was the America powered by tariffs. And there's going to be a little pain on the way to get us back to that place, but it's going to be well worth it once we're done reorienting this economy to make this country great once more.
You wrote a piece in the Daily Caller that President Trump shared on his Truth Social that basically says reciprocal tariffs don't go far enough, and that President Trump needs to impose pollution tariffs on countries like China and India. Walk us through the logic of that argument.
Well, listen, I think reciprocity is a great first step. I think it's going to force many of these other countries to the table. They're going to have to drop their barriers, their restrictions, their tariffs, their VATs, and other mechanisms they use to prohibit the export of American goods. And I think that's going to be good all around, because we're going to actually have free trade between countries of a similar development, a similar regulatory environment, similar labor standards. I think that's a good thing, and competition will win out. And the countries who are reticent to do that, namely China and others, I think we're paving the way for a new round of potential tariffs. President Trump said it himself. Some of these were not fully reciprocal. They could have gone higher. And I think to justify some of these higher rates, I think a pollution tariff could be a fantastic mechanism to achieve two end goals. One, to help protect American industry and reshore jobs and to fix the trade imbalance. That's one economic bucket, but also dealing with an environmental bucket. One of the reasons that China is able to undercut us is not just their trade policies, but their domestic situation. They have no environmental standards. They have no labor protections. They basically run slave labor sweatshops. So of course they're going to be able to undercut the competition with their cheap goods, because they have no standards of decorum when it comes to commerce and doing business. They're cutthroat, they're ruthless, and to their own people and to the environment. But the environment is all of ours. We're all living in a world where we have to deal with the pollution and the environmental hazards created by China. Look at COVID. That was sort of an example of it, with their sloppy standards as it comes to their medical research facilities, some of which were funded by Fauci. But a pollution tariff can be tied to the rate of emissions, and it could punish China for engaging in practices that are harmful to the environment, and it could force them to increase their protections for the environment, raise their standards of regulations as it pertains to the environment, as it pertains to labor, to match the Western world, namely the United States. States. So when these tariffs inevitably come down somewhat, not only do we have an even playing field in terms of the tariff situation, but we have a more even playing field in terms of the regulatory framework that both our countries' industries have to operate in. So I think it's a win-win across the board, and I think it's a position that many Democrats should be able to jump on in favor of. They used to be the party of the working class. They used to be the party of American industry and the unions. They've given that up, but they're still somewhat the party of the environment, the Green New Deal and all the rest. So they should have no problem embracing a pollution tariff if advocated by the President Trump's administration.
So if you were advising President Trump right now on economic policy, especially on tariffs, what would you recommend the president do, especially based on what you wrote in that piece?
Look, I think pollution tariff should be in the mix. I think he needs to hold the course. I think him and his team, Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, Secretary of Commerce Lutnick, they understand what we have to do here. We have to reorient and realign the American economy to be an economy that produces and creates rather than one that simply consumes and borrows. And I think that's going to be for the long-term health of this country, particularly the working and middle class who have been shafted for a very long time. Real wages have not gone up. Jobs have been going overseas. The jobs we have here have been replaced by foreign labor. We have a whole litany of problems. American towns and cities and states, entire states, have been gutted economically and spiritually. So we need an American revival. We need a rejuvenation. And I think the tariff is a great tool to do it. It's a historic tool that's always been used by this country to protect our industry. You could look up the American School of Economics, going back to Hamilton and the Whigs. These were the types of policies we used to industrialize our country and turn us into the superpower we are. But recommendations to the Trump administration, I mean, I would follow up with these on these tariffs with obviously more tariffs if we need to punish some of the countries that don't want to come to the table. But I also would start to look to the home front. I would look to domestic rates of taxation. We can do another round of tax cuts, both on individuals and on American businesses, particularly manufacturers. We can have targeted tax cuts to manufacturers, to small businesses, to family-owned businesses, to businesses that are employing exclusively American labor and not importing their labor. We can look at, giving some relief even to the stock market. If people are going to shriek and cry about it, look at eliminating the tax on dividends. Look at capital gains taxes. Throw them a bone, balance things out. The goal is shift our revenue to external sources from internal sources. So tax Americans and American businesses less and tax foreign imports more. I think that's the goal here. It's to shift our revenue source. It's to shift our supply chains. And I think we could do it between tariffs and also a Trump 1.0 deregulatory push and tax cut push. I think a lot of the more traditional Republican members of Congress will have no problem supporting that. So they should get their act together and vote for it.
I explained in my monologue that Democrats were very protectionist with small businesses in New York City, and likely still are. But when it comes to the national federal stage, they're first in line to ship Americans, working class Americans, jobs overseas. What's with that discrepancy?
I mean, these guys are total fools or total hypocrites. They don't have a clear position on anything. They oscillate with the changing winds. I mean, this was the party that always used to proclaim they're the party of the working man, the working woman, the unions. They've totally given up on their original base, and they've been losing elections ever since. The only elections they win is when Republicans are too dumb to get on with President Trump's agenda and follow through on his mission. That's the only time they win elections. It's because of our own folly, not because of their own genius. And as far as it comes to their rhetoric and their policy position, as it relates to corporate America and Wall Street, I mean, they're completely contradictory. One minute they're attacking, Elon Musk and going after him and the billionaires and attacking Teslas and all sorts of nonsense. The next thing you know, they're crying about the stock market. They're crying about corporate profits and earnings. I mean, was this not the party of Occupy Wall Street? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. This is who they were supporting. So they are a party with an identity crisis. They're a party that's facing a major bout of bipolarism. They don't understand what lane they want to take. Are they the party for the working man, the working woman, for American labor, for American industry? Or are they the party for the corporate fat cats? Are they the party of Wall Street? Are they the party of the globalists, the elites, and the offshoring? I don't know what they want to. I don't know what they want to do. But if they want to advocate for the latter, be my guest. It's horrible politics. It's horrible electoral strategy, and frankly, it's horrible economics. We've done that for the last few decades. Our country's been hollowed out. We're less prosperous. We're less safe as a result. We're entirely dependent. We have strategic supply chains abroad. It's completely ridiculous. We need to return to a country that builds, that produces, that creates, that innovates, and protects our people and our interests, and stop being simply an economic zone where we're tracking lines on a chart, namely GDP, which means nothing for the bottom line. The stock market going up, it hurts people like me, but it doesn't help people in middle America. It doesn't help people that are working 9-to-5 jobs, that are looking out for their family, that are dealing with mortgages, that are dealing with rising inflation, that are dealing with rising costs of living, that are having their jobs replaced by foreigners, that are having the jobs that they still have being sent overseas. We need to look out for American people, the American people, and we need to stop looking out for foreign interests, globalist interests, and and advocating for the greed of the few at the expense of the many.
Yeah. Gavin Wax, president of the New York Young Republican Club, and my dear friend, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, sir. Take care.